My friends, Satan has no other plan but to add to and take away from the Word of God. What are some of the most influential events in human history since the creation of time? We're going to walk through this because I want to show you and build this up and set the foundation of why this is so important. Some of the most influential events in human history are the following. I think these are my top four, in my opinion. Number one, the giving of the commandments in the garden. When God told Adam and Eve, here's what I want you to do, that was number one. Number two, top four events. Number two, the giving of the commandments at Mount Sinai. I would say that was probably a pretty incredibly significant event that the enemy would not want us to understand what happened there. Number three, the birth of the Messiah. And number four, the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah. So if those are the top four events in all of human history, then if you were the enemy, what would you try to do? Well, you would do exactly what he's done, is get people to be misguided in how those events took place and to make us stumble on those events. Okay? So that's what we're going to look at. Now, we already understand that Adam fell and he did a good job at deceiving Adam. We already understand that when the commandments were given on Mount Sinai, that he got God's people away from just keeping the actual commandments and adding to them and taking away from them. Well, now we're going to focus on the birth of the Messiah and the resurrection of the Messiah. And you're going to see how powerful the birth and the resurrection of the Messiah really are, because the enemy is working overtime to deceive God's people in some areas. So if those are the top four, then what do you think Satan's main goal is? To steal, kill, and destroy. And how have you established that he does that? Remember, he cannot change the truth. So the only thing that he can do is add something to it. A lie. So I'm going to tell a story. Once upon a time. Now, many of you out there have never heard this story before on where we get Easter from and Christmas. So it starts off, believe it or not, with the great-grandson of Noah, and his name was Nimrod. And Nimrod was a mighty hunter in the land. He was the king of the world at that known time. He built Nineveh. He was known for his drunkenness, his covetousness, his strength. He had great armies. He built the Tower of Babel and the city of Nineveh. He was a ruler of the then known world, okay? Known for idolatry, his rebelliousness towards God. For all intents and purposes, he was a bad guy, okay? And what happened was when he died, because he was king of the earth, they deified him. He was the first person on earth that the people of the earth deified. And they made him the sun god, and his name was Baal. Okay? And that's really important. But before he died, he married a young lady named Semiramis. Okay? And Semiramis was his wife. So when he died and they deified him, he became the sun god. And then shortly thereafter, as luck would have it in the Babylonian legend, she gets pregnant by the rays of her deceased husband, Baal, Nimrod. And she has a son called Tammuz. And Tammuz now is the resurrected Nimrod. He also became a big hunter, and he became a ruler instead of his husband, in his father's stead, excuse me. And he basically took the place of his father. Well, one day, this is very fascinating. One day he was out hunting, and he was 40 years old, and he got killed by a wild boar. Okay? And so what happened was, after that, they deified him as the Son of God, the Son of God. You can see how the enemy, as I tell this story, is beginning to he knows the beginning from the end, and he's beginning to rewrite history before history actually happens. And so Tammuz becomes the baby of Semiramis. And by the way, Semiramis also marries her own son. Okay? We'll find out what that ended up being in today's tradition as well. So Tammuz is the son of Semiramis. He becomes the reincarnated Nimrod. And then every year after that, for 40 days, because remember, Tammuz was 40 years old, for 40 days before the spring equinox, they would not eat. They would fast. And that's where we get Lent from.